Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Katie Shank with Keller Williams Realty Atlanta Midtown, and we are here for our live Zoom/live Facebook Atlanta real estate update. Here with my great partner, and I'm going to introduce everybody and let us know if you have any questions or anything during this whole thing. Everybody's going to have a little portion to speak, and then you can either write a question in the chat box or on Facebook in the Facebook Live, and we'll stop and answer your question as we go through. So again, I'm Katie Shank with Keller Williams. Thank you for being here. I've got Robby King, who is my business partner and buyer's agent here. Jonathan Minsk with Maris Mortgage, mortgage lender. And then today's special guest is Harry Minsk with just Gannick Law Firm, closing attorneys. And again, we'll all speak during this. If you have questions for any of us, just go ahead and put them in the chat box or, ask us as we talk. So as usual, I'm going to start out with Robby and talk about the stats of the last week. I believe this is week 11 of this call.
It is, yes.
I'm now, but I think it's week 11. And I see we have some guests on Zoom, so thank you guys for joining as well. So Robby, go ahead and give us the stats for the last week of in town Atlanta. What's happening in real estate?
Sure. So not much of a change. If anything, the only thing that I noticed was that there was an uptick in closings, because I know the week before was a holiday week / holiday weekend, so there weren't that many closings. But these are the stats for inside the perimeter in Atlanta for the last 7 days. Average sales price $482,000, almost $483,000. Median days on the market 28 days. So between listing the property as active and going under contract with a binding agreement that closes, only 28 days, so around a month. It's been that way for the last several weeks. We did have, we crossed over into a new month. So months of available inventory did change a little bit. So for the last several weeks, the months of available inventory inside the perimeter, was 3.8 months. Now we're at 4.0 months. So that's for the month of May. And I did go back to look at what May was in 2019, and it was exactly the same. So we've kind of been looking at last year a little bit with some of these numbers to see if COVID or any other, issues that are going on, any other myriad issues going on in the world right now have affected real estate sales, and they honestly really haven't. So 4 months of available inventory, median sales to list price ratio is just north of 98%. So for sales to list price ratio. So if you list your home for, if it's priced correctly, you're, probably going to get around, very, very close to asking price, almost 100% of asking price if it's priced correctly for where it is and for the condition. Now, as far as listings go, there were 396 new listings posted to the FMLS last week. 2 were listed as coming soon, so not quite active. Maybe there are some repairs or some things that need to be done before they're really actively marketing the property, but those should be listed soon. 115 homes went pending to sell. 135 homes closed. So I think last week it was maybe only around 50. Or 2 weeks ago, I guess you could say, it was around 50. So last week was 135. So there's the uptick I talked about. And then currently there's 4,381 total active listings in the FMLS inside the perimeter in Atlanta. And those are my stats for the week. Any questions?
Awesome. Well, I think those are great stats, and I love, the continuing of the consistency during this period, and also I love that you compared it to last year. Traditionally, Atlanta and a lot of markets, spring is kind of the hottest, into summer market. And Harry and I were just talking before the call that an article we just saw is that, summer is the new spring. So I feel like we're just on a trajectory up, up, up. You know, the numbers keep going up as time goes on here. So I think we're getting ready for a very busy summer as well. So yeah, if anybody has any questions for Robby, let me know. If not, we'll move on to Jonathan and his stats. And like I said, there'll be time to go back around and ask any questions otherwise. So Jonathan, can you share with us about the mortgage industry this week?
Yes, thanks, Katie. So I've got some stats as well. In the month of May, Ameris Bank closed just over $1 billion in mortgages, which is our best month ever. Of that $1 billion, about half of it, 50% of it, was in Georgia. And of that 500 million plus that was in Georgia, 100+ million was just in my office alone, my Buckhead office. So, you know, people are asking me, have I seen a slowdown? And the answer is no. I mean, it just keeps getting more and more. So we just got our June projections today. It looks like in Georgia, we're going to do about 464 million as of right now. Total for the company, about 945 million, and a total of almost 3,300 units. So nothing is slowing down. I mean, it's like a locomotive, just straight ahead. Interest rates haven't changed since last week. I mean, we're still, you know, between 3 and 3.25, depending on, you know, the various add-ons that may apply. For a 15-year, we're looking at about mid-2s. So, you know, now is an excellent time to pull the trigger. And as we've mentioned on the past calls, you know, it's definitely a buyer's market. I'm sorry, it's a seller's market. And there's not that much inventory. And as Robby mentioned, we've got 4 months of inventory on the market, which is still really low. And you know, as Katie just mentioned, that, you know, that we firmly believe that, you know, summer is going to be when people are just coming out of the woodworks and looking to buy homes, where traditionally it's in the early spring. And once that happens, we're going to see that there's going to be, you know, for every listing, there's going to be, you know, 10 people looking at it. And so we're going to see, again, probably a situation where every property that's priced right and is a new listing is probably going to go under, you know, multiple offers. And so it's going to be much more competitive for those waiting, you know, 2 or 3 months down the road versus getting out there now and getting a jump start, you know, on looking at properties. So with that said, I mean, we're working remotely for the most part, company-wide, and we're able to do $1 billion worth of business. So fortunately, with technology, the virus isn't slowing us down at all, and there's no reason to think that anything will stop that. So as I have stressed on, you know, these calls in the past, you know, I would say for those people that are sort of in the wings and thinking, you know, is now the time to buy, or should I wait until, you know, all of this sort of subsides? I would definitely say, go ahead, get pre-qualified, you know, get in touch with Robby and Katie and start looking, because it's gonna improve your chances of getting a home with a lot less competition that is going to be out there in, you know, 2 or 3 months. So with that said, I will now turn it over to Harry.
Cool. And real quick, I do have something to add to this. Thank you, Jonathan. I got to tell you and brag and be so excited and thank Jonathan that I've just locked in last week the lowest interest rate of my life. And I've been not only a realtor, but a homeowner for almost 20 years. And I got a 2.9%
Wow.
interest rate on my refinance.
Yep.
And I'm thrilled. And I would have been thrilled with 3%, 3.1. I mean, that's incredible. And it's never happened, and it's probably never going to happen again. So obviously Jonathan's excellent. I've worked with him for a long time, and personally he's done other loans for me, but to get that rate as well is just incredible. So if that's not an example of, you know, now is the time, I don't really know what else is. So that's
Exactly.
the story I want
Exactly.
to share. And so on that, we'll talk to Harry. So Harry Minsk, it's not a coincidence that they have the same last name. Obviously, there was some real estate, you know, situation going on with their parents and these kids. But Harry is a partner in a very awesome and large law firm here in Atlanta named Gannick. And Harry joined us to tell us what's going on with their firm and talk about, you know, what's been going on the last 11 weeks since COVID and the adjustments that he's made in his business, and also how is business. And, you know, early on, there were concerns regarding, I think, title work and other things taking longer, closings taking longer. And as we've told you on these calls, we're not seeing that, but, Harry can speak to exactly what they're doing to prevent those delays. So Harry, please tell us a little about what you do, and then we may have some questions for you as well.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. The first thing I'd say is when I bought my first house, the loan officer said to me, I have good news and bad news. And I said, what is the bad news? And they said, we forgot to lock you in. And I said, what is the good news? And they said, we've locked you in at 9% interest rate. And so I say that as a perspective of what's going on. I've been a real estate lawyer for 35 years. Rates have never been like this. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity for people that are considering buying, selling, moving up, moving down, et cetera, to be involved in the market. And so the rates, as you're saying, are historically low. My experience is that they go down very slowly, but they go up very fast. And so, people sometimes want to time the market and wait for it to be at the very bottom, and all of a sudden something changes and it goes up. And so my suggestion is always find a rate that you're happy with and lock it in. Now, as far as COVID goes, there's a lot of things that we were very concerned about. The first is that we're regulated by the State Bar of Georgia. And so whatever we were going to do had to be in compliance with the State Bar. Because we're lawyers, and to wait for the State Bar to give us certain directions, which they've done through Brian Kemp and the Georgia Supreme Court. Once that happened, we were then having to deal with the lenders who were coming up with their requirements for how to close transactions. And their requirements were in many ways based on what Fannie, Freddie, and VA were willing to approve. And those were changing. And then on top of that, we had to deal with the title companies and what they were willing to allow us to do to close the transactions. So we were kind of dealing with a lot of different masters whose regulations and requirements were changing very quickly and almost daily, sometimes hourly. And so it was very complicated for us not to necessarily know, how we were going to handle the transaction. But it seemed to have settled out relatively quickly. And we're able to offer a lot of different ways to close now. And maybe I could just talk about that for a moment. Is that okay? Yes? Okay. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Yes? Okay. So the first is that...
Thank you. Sorry, I haven't...
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure.
That.
All right. So we have the ability now, assuming that the buyer's lender will allow us to close via Zoom or Teams. That has its own issues that we can discuss. We can also do powers of attorney or mail aways to parties if they don't want to come to closing. We've done sellers in the car. That creates its own issues if it starts raining or the weather is bad. And then obviously we can still do in-office closings. And we have found that most people seem to prefer the in-office closing. We are trying to keep the number of people to a minimum who actually come into our office. And oftentimes we are doing sellers and buyers separately, and then collecting keys and handling whatever issues that we need to handle kind of as a conduit. We also have certain agents or family members who have wanted to come to closing and could not for a reason or two, and we can Zoom them in. And so if you have family members who want to come, they're welcome to, we can Zoom and they can watch and see what's going on just as if they were physically there. So there really hasn't been a tremendous upheaval in the way we're doing it. It just varies based on whatever people's needs and desires are, and we're very accommodating to try to meet whatever those needs are. And as far as the volume goes, we've been very busy, just as everybody has. We're very fortunate. We have a good firm, a good reputation within the industry, and a lot of people who have used us. We're a 40-year-old plus law firm, and people know that we stand behind our work, and we've been very fortunate to have maintained a very high level of business during this time. So thank you, and I'm here to help any way I can.
That's great. Thank you so much, Harry. That's very helpful information. And I know you kind of touched on it because Jonathan asked this question earlier regarding how many people are actually taking advantage of the Zoom option, you know, versus coming in person. Or I know personally, I've gone to a couple car closings that you referred to, or maybe they stood outside the car, but this was kind of early on, you know, this is probably now 8 weeks ago. So it's nice to know that, you know, again, a lot of people are still coming in. As realtors, we love to attend closings, and, you know, lenders will attend too. And sometimes a party, you've got your family members there. So that's one thing I know that's changed. It's really just the buyers and or the sellers. And I know most of the time it's just, they're in different rooms as well.
We are. You know, at first we were trying to limit it to just the buyer and the seller. Now people seem to, as we've dealt with the virus over a period of time, we've kind of come to understand it. I think things have become a bit more relaxed. I've always said this, Katie, your client has a relationship with you. And this is the way I felt always. The client has a relationship, whether they're the buyer or the seller. And for me to meet them, maybe for the first time at the closing, without you, the agent, being there, I thought was wrong. And so I thought it was a disservice to the buyer or the seller. And I understand why they wouldn't want you there. You know, sometimes if they want to bring the entire family, and some people want to be a family, you know, we try to limit that. But I've never wanted to limit the realtor, because I think you're an integral part in the whole transaction. And if you want to be there, it was always acceptable for me. As far as Zoom goes, Zoom creates its own issues because the documents have to be physically delivered to the parties for them to physically sign. It's not like an electronic signature. It just happens to be signed over the internet in the Zoom. And so most people, when given the opportunity to say, well, I've got to get the documents and bring them back to me, have chosen to physically come to closing. It just seems as easy to do so than having to sign and then come and then bring the documents in. But again, it's really whatever people want. And some people, you know, who are more susceptible to the virus, or they're elderly, and they want to do it via Zoom, we're more than happy to accommodate. It's really, I really just want to say that it's really whatever the parties want. You know, whatever they want, we're willing to accommodate.
That's great. Thank you. That's very helpful.
I have a question.
I know. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
So on that topic, so obviously, you know, with what has happened with COVID-19 and, you know, lenders offering other options to closings and seeing that it is working well, do you anticipate that some of these options will be extended past COVID-19, or do you foresee things will go back to the way they were, and really the only option is to do face-to-face closings, power of attorneys, or mail-aways?
I think that once you start to see, we're going to call it progress or change, that to go back to the way it has been probably will not occur. Right now, what we're seeing is that some of these extensions by the Georgia Supreme Court that I discussed, or from Governor Kemp, have been extended. And so we're able to continue to do things the way that I've been discussing. If those end, then my guess is that we will go back to the way that we were doing them for now. But I think that there's in place steps that you're going to see continued electronic use in closings. And I think that's where it's ultimately going. So you may see a step back initially, and then of course, to do certain things in Georgia, you have to get the Supreme Court's approval, you have to get the state legislature's approval. So there are certain factors that are going to have to occur before before this is going totally electronic. But I think ultimately that's where it's going. Technology just continues to permeate its way into the transaction.
Yeah, I know. And I know there are other states already that are doing electronic. They had been pre-COVID. You know, I have a seller that sold a home here, and he bought a home in Portland, Oregon, and he told me he did not have to be present, that he could do things electronically there. So I would imagine if that's happening in Portland, why wouldn't it eventually happen here, you know?
Well, you know, every state is different. Every state has its own particular laws, and you know, we have to comply with whatever the Georgia laws are. But yes, I would believe that you will see in the next whatever period of time, and I don't think it's going to be that long, that it's going to continue to be more and more electronic. Yes, I believe that.
Cool. That's really good and helpful. So I know we have a few people on the Zoom. I'm not going to call you out and embarrass you, but please let us know if you have any questions. Good to see you on here. And speaking of the West Coast, I think you're on the West Coast, right? So feel free to unmute yourselves or talk if you'd like. Actually, I can unmute you. Are you muted? No.
I think
Do you have any questions for us right now?
Yeah, this is Brian. I have a couple of questions. I think maybe for Robby and Jonathan. Can you speak to some of the, you gave some helpful stats. Can you speak to some of the trends that you're seeing, and more specifically, can you maybe point to, maybe not all the stats that you're, maybe focus on some of the leading indicators. I'm particularly interested to know what your thoughts are about the anticipated unemployment numbers and how that affects the market, and what buyers should be thinking about given those metrics.
Well, I have some things to say, and then I think there's some of that maybe Jonathan might want to speak to, but what I'm seeing, so we've been doing, this is like our 11th call, and we started doing these calls or meetings or whatever when the COVID outbreak started ramping up. And we wanted, you know, we obviously wanted to assuage fears of our clients and that sort of thing, but also it was really for our own knowledge too, because if the market was going to start to tilt one way or another, we want to be the first people to tell our clients. So really what we have seen is slightly fewer transactions than we would expect this time of year, but home values have stayed strong, and the Atlanta market has stayed strong because real estate is local. You can look at what's going on across the country, and that's kind of like a good benchmark for what's going on, you know, in the real estate market, but it's so hyper local, and it's going to be very specific to where you're looking at. So you asked a question about trends. I think what I have seen in the last 2+ months is that the trend has stayed the same. The market has really stayed the same as it has been for the last several years in Atlanta. And basically, I think part of the reason for that is that there's such a high demand for housing here and not enough inventory. For the market to change significantly, those factors would have to change, and they haven't changed. There's still a lot of people who are trying to buy in Atlanta, and there's not enough inventory. And so that is why we look at months of available inventory, because that is really going to dictate, you know, the supply is going to dictate what the value is. So we look at that a lot. And then you asked a question about unemployment numbers and how that might factor in. I have something to say about that, but I think Jonathan might speak to that too, because I think that unemployment numbers are obviously kind of staggering right now. It's really high, but I think that lenders' response to that has been measured and careful. I think that low interest rates and also programs like forbearances and things like that have kind of helped to mitigate that loss, the job loss situation. And I don't know if Jonathan, if you want to talk about that a little bit, or.
Yeah. So I'm going to probably interpret the question a little differently, and please tell me if my thought process is not in line with what your question was. But as far as trends go, what we are seeing is that because more and more people are being laid off or furloughed, that they're going and taking the opportunity to put their mortgages in forbearance. And forbearance used to be a very negative connotation, but the way that it's worked out now with lenders is that if you put your mortgage in forbearance, okay, it's reported on your credit report as forbearance, but it says crisis related, health crisis related. So lenders understand that the reason why the loan is in forbearance is because of probably a job loss or maybe a cut and pay or something along those lines. And and so it's not being reported from a credit standpoint as negative. But if you do put a loan into into forbearance, you have to make 3 consecutive payments on time after you take the loan out of forbearance to either refinance the home or to buy another house. Okay, and I think a lot of people that are putting their properties into forbearance don't understand that in advance, because we're starting to see people that want to now buy, but their current mortgage is in forbearance, and you've got to just explain to them that, you know, the guidelines have changed and you need to go ahead and take that loan out of forbearance and make 3 payments, and then you'll be fine. Another thing that's changed is people that are self-employed. It's, you know, with at the very onset of this, you know, there was essential and non-essential employees, you know, that were considered going to work and not going to work, and people that were hairdressers and worked in nail salons and things of those natures were considered non-essential. And so obviously their income was impacted substantially. And typically the way that self-employed borrowers' income is documented is with 2 years of tax returns. And it's pretty simplistic. But because of all of this, and knowing that some of these people who may have made X dollars last year are not making that same income right now. And in order to qualify them, we have to take extra steps, to make sure that they are first of all working at all, and then to somehow document what kind of income they're making. It can just be maybe something like they have an online billing system or booking system that we can see that they're taking on appointments or something along those lines. It's new for everybody. So, and then also what's being implemented is that, you know, we have to check to see that people's employment, their income hasn't changed, you know, within 72 hours of closing, because a lot of companies what they're doing is that in lieu of laying off their employees or putting them on furlough, they're offering them, you know, pay cuts. And these pay cuts, you know, may be for 3 months, they may be for 9 months, but you have to take that into consideration. So somebody, for example, I know a lot of Delta employees got a 25% pay increase for possibly 90 days. There's no guarantee that it'll come back after 90 days.
Decrease, not increase.
Oh, I'm sorry, decrease, okay.
Decrease.
And so that decrease could make the difference of them qualifying and not qualifying. And so we're charting new territories, and new guidelines are coming into place. But, you know, for somebody who's a salaried employee who is paid on a W-2, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. It's just those people that either have gone through a layoff, a furlough, or have put their current mortgage into forbearance, or somebody who is self-employed, do the new guidelines apply. So I don't know if that answers your questions. I hope it does.
Well, it's helpful. I think more what I'm getting at is, so given all the, you know, and to be fair, I don't expect everybody to have all these answers really kind of dialed in, because I do some of this own sort of analysis from my own industry, and it's very difficult, and we've not been in a situation like this, and we don't really know what 10%, 15%, and north of that unemployment really means in the, you know, down the road. But I guess what I'm asking is, for everything that I hear and read, is, indicates some of what you're seeing currently. Things are fairly strong. Probably a surprising number of closings and listings, and prices aren't affected yet. But I guess I'm just wondering, it just seems hard to imagine as we go through the summer and these forbearance periods come to a close, and some of the stimulus money, is no longer available, or whatever, all those sort of government options or supports. It seems to me that at some point we should see an impact on prices, right? Shouldn't we expect prices to go down when there are less people working and less buyers, I guess? And so if you could just sort of speak to that a little bit, because a lot of what I'm trying to understand is, so Dave and I are sort of, we both have sold houses in the last little while, so we have some cash to invest, but we're trying to figure out, there are a lot of pieces to that, but one of the pieces is what's the right time? And I'm not trying to time the market. I'm trying to decide whether to stay on the sidelines and let the fire kind of burn itself out, or jump in while interest rates are low. And so that's kind of like the data points we keep kind of circling around.
Sure. Okay. I think I kind of understand more where your question lies. So just based on what I'm seeing now, there is absolutely no indication right now that property values are going to go down. In fact, it's the opposite. And Robby can probably, and Katie can probably, talk to this more than me, but we're seeing when a really brand new listing hits the market and it's priced right, that it's going into multiple offers. And so, as Robby had mentioned earlier in the call, I think the ask to sale price is about 90-something percent, 98%, something like that, Robby?
Yeah, median sales to list price ratio is about 98%.
Which means that, when someone lists a house on the market and it goes under contract, they're getting 98% of what they're asking. And then sometimes if there's multiple offers, they may end up actually paying more, slightly over what the asking price is. And if we were going into a market that was declining, I think we would see that be reflected in the appraisals. And I haven't had a single appraisal, not one, come in low during this whole entire crisis.
How do you contrast this experience that you're describing now? How do you contrast that with what we saw in 2008?
That's an excellent question, and a lot of people want to try to correlate the two, and there is no correlation. What happened in 2008 was due to the subprime market. It was the lenders made a lot of bad loans, and they all came tumbling down at once. What's happening now is due to the virus. It has nothing to do with anything economic. It's having economic implications, but it's something that when the virus is under control and past us, which I believe is probably 1 to 2 months away, I think that things are going to go back to the way that they were. I mean, there's going to be some changes in the way that people just live their lives in general now because of this, but I think from a financial perspective, the two, 2008 and 2020, there's no similarities there. And I think a lot of people are taking that stance like, well, in 2008, the values just plummeted. So I'm going to sit on the sidelines and wait and see if the property values start to fall. And at this point, there's no indication that is happening or going to happen. Now,
Jonathan,
and who knows?
May I interject something on that?
Sure.
All right. In 2005, I mean, a lot of this came as a result of 9/11, and we saw after 9/11 that the rates were coming down, and the regulations were coming down, and people were buying homes in a lot of different crazy ways, and they were financing them crazy ways. And then all of a sudden, the homes were appreciating so fast because there was such a demand, because the regulations were so low that people were buying regardless of good principles. Well, then that stopped. For it just the chair got pulled out and it just stopped. And then what happened was a lot of these homes were overvalued. The buyers couldn't make the payments. The banks started taking the properties back in masses, and then they started to foreclose and dump them. And when they started dumping them, then it affected not only the value of the house that was being foreclosed on and sold, but it was affecting all of the values of the homes in the neighborhood. And so all of a sudden there was this massive tsunami that was bringing down the prices of homes that was solely the result of the housing market. And that is not the case here with what has happened. Jonathan is maybe a bit more optimistic than I am, and that in a month or two it may be subsiding. But I think what you're going to see that as people learn to live with this, and they are, and as the more and more vaccines and drugs come to market, they're just going to help us live with it. And it may be the new normal for a while, that we're going to live with it until one day there's going to be a vaccine, and then it's going to basically be something of the past. So I don't see the same indicators historically that would cause this type of drop that you saw in 2008 now. And I hope that's helpful as well.
So I have a question, like if you view that there be any difference in these kind of trends, and maybe it's too early to tell from just the last 11 weeks, if you stratify that by the type of housing, like if you think of self-employed or contract or more gig work thing, like maybe you're talking more condo level, but people who are more salaried, who are potentially have to have organizations absorb the changes, would be maybe more of the single family home thing. Is there going to be a difference in how this kind of plays out, especially once these forbearances, and are we going to see more turnover in the condo market, but maybe the houses, people are going to hold on their houses longer than they might have otherwise, or is it going to be a thing of like just the opportunity for foreign investors to come in and just kind of swoop in with cash offers type of thing? I guess are you seeing a difference in mobility of based on the type of house it is compared to maybe last year?
I mean, I would have to dig into that to really answer the question. I mean, there's definitely a bit of a difference in attached homes versus detached homes, and how they sell and how long they stay on the market and that sort of thing. I mean, compared to last year, I would say that almost all new construction, not all of it, but almost all new construction is attached. And in Atlanta, what people are looking for by and large are attached homes. I mean, those are what's being developed, but I don't know if they're selling any differently from last year or if single family homes. I'll say that I've heard, I mean, of course, like anything you say about the future is just total speculation, so we don't really know. But I have heard a lot, different analysts and different people discussing, pre-COVID, their presumption that in the future, maybe in the semi-distant future, that a single family home might eventually become more valuable in Atlanta than an attached home, only because there are going to be, the ratio of attached homes versus detached homes is going to be greater, right? Like it's going to be less and less available because we're not building them anymore. But as far as the effect that COVID has had on that, I would have to really dig into it. I'm not sure.
Well, one thing I would say in general to your question, David, which is maybe going off a little bit, but what I will say is that I think there are a lot of people, we've been working recently in the last few months with a lot of renters, first-time home buyers. And I will say that Robby can speak to this, that the majority, or a lot of them, have been more at single family homes than condos, and I think that's for various reasons.
All of them. Not everybody.
Reasons, and I have to just guess that some of those reasons are, again, having outdoor space. being at home more, you know, having a yard if they have kids or dogs. I mean, I was just having this conversation with another friend of mine prior to getting on this call, encouraging him to get on the call, because he was just saying, what kind of homes specifically, you know, are you seeing more condos sell or houses, or what kind of buyers are you working with? And I was telling him that what I'm talking about, and also that I can see the future, that many people might be coming from condos and or apartments, living in close quarters and feeling a little cramped and wanting more space, and also coming from cities like New York, you know, like San Francisco, like, you know, there's just more people wanting more space, and we have that here, obviously. So not to say that, you know, I live in a townhome with backyard, you know, David used to as well. So those are still very desirable, but I just see that, yes, a single family home is going to be in the city, definitely sometimes a more desired thing, but not to like downplay condos or townhomes, because there are so many great new listings or new construction opportunities out there. And we're also working with, you know, very high-end clients that are downsizing from a 10,000 square foot home in the suburbs, and they just want a one level, you know, beautiful home in the sky, basically. So, you know, it's a range of people, but obviously they'll have the space there and the outdoor space that a lot of people can't afford in some of these apartments and condos. So, you know, I don't know if that helps you, you know, with your question, or you're curious regarding, you know, investment wise versus actually living in something, as you know, can be very different too. I mean, buying a home to live in is an investment, but if you're thinking strictly investment money wise, that you look at it a little differently, maybe, right?
Yeah. No, I was definitely thinking about like more for just own personal use. I know just in the time that I've been back in Atlanta, I've been surprised at how many like new construction things I see are really these really large things, apparently for people that want to have 5 kids or something.
Yeah. You mean house-wise? Yeah, single family house.
Like, I would go through like Morningside, La Vista Park, and like they're building these beautiful places, but they're all kind of like
big,
much larger than, and I feel like that middle niche is kind of dropping away from that. Okay, well, maybe I want to graduate out of a bigger space than a townhouse, but I don't necessarily want a Marietta size big mansion.
Yeah. You're right. And, you know, we also have clients like in the Smyrna, Mableton area, and, you know, they have opportunities there where they've got some older ranches and those types of homes that aren't as big, but they're spread out, more land, you know, and there's just renovation possibilities there, whether they're buying something that's already been renovated or they have opportunity to renovate. Financially, sometimes it seems to be a good fit for people, but then they're not in the city of Atlanta. But then the benefit is their taxes are less, you know, so it's a give and take. It just comes down to ultimately, if you're living in it, where you want to be, and then of course, financially, what you're comfortable with, you know. But I will say too, on side where I am, West Midtown, there are some, you know, opportunities of kind of more cluster-like homes that a builder named Brock, you know, does quite a few of, and we've recently looked at some of those for clients. So there are some opportunities in that respect. There's just not as many, you know, but that's what we do, is we dig them up for you. We find them. So when you tell us what you're looking for, you know, we try to find it as much as we can. So I don't know, does this answer a lot of your questions? Or if you all have more, keep going. We love it. And if anybody on Facebook has any questions, please write a comment in the chat section on Facebook. I'm taking a look at it. Robby and Jonathan have theirs open, but I see there's some people watching. So if anybody have any questions, let us know. Or Harry, if you have any questions, let us know.
No.
Everybody's quiet. How is it? You guys are in near LA now, right? How are things there?
Well, right now it's quiet. Well, it was quiet.
Oh, there's the dogs. Yeah.
It's been pretty interesting the last few days. The protests are happening kind of on, you know, east of us by about a mile in Beverly Hills, and west of us near the 405 freeway by about the same distance. But by and large, you know, it's kind of continued shelter in place, which has been the case for the last, I don't know, 9 weeks, or I've lost count, 9 or 10 weeks.
Yeah, or 11, whatever.
I think, yeah, here, so not that this has anything to do with real estate, but just as we're on the topic of the protests and so forth, I think that the new, you know, the new charges that were brought against the other 3 police officers involved in the incident. I think hopefully we'll make these protests, and not so much the protests, but the looting and the rioting subside. And hopefully, the new biggest headline will be back to, COVID-19, and there'll be peace. There'll be peace
There's a
here.
lot going on.
Neither is positive, but back to real estate, there is some positive stuff going on. Although, Atlanta, we're very similar, I think, in LA. In any major city, we're dealing with the same. We've got a curfew here, until who knows when. So that said, it's another thing that we're dealing with in these major cities, and specifically in Atlanta, and with this team of professionals that Robby and I work with. Like, we've proven, I think, that we can kind of deal with almost anything. I mean, this has been a very difficult 11 weeks to deal with on pretty much every level, whether you've been, affected, by sickness, or by losing your job, or just by going nuts, being in your house so much, me, if you're social, there's different levels. So we've dealt with it all. And,
the introverts of the world have fared much better, I think.
The what?
The introverts of the world have
the introverts are like thrilled. Yeah, I have many friends that are like, this is no different for me. Well, it's very different for me. So anyway, even they'll start crying. They're like, we like to go to dinner once. So that said, the good news of it is that we are, we're here, we're healthy, we're helping people, we're doing things safely. We've got every sanitary, thing that you need. We've got masks, with listings especially, I've talked about listings on past calls and how we're handling that. And, I have listings where people live in it, and I have listings where they're vacant. And, we're just very cautious on both ends. And, again, the good news of it is that we're able to do this still, and that things are moving, and we hope they'll continue to move, and that we work with excellent vendors on every level. We've got an attorney and a lender here, but every week we try to have different people on. So we encourage you to join us as often as you'd like if you're curious to hear more. And I hope that you'll be able to travel back to Atlanta sometime soon as well. And if you ever want to talk further or look at anything, we're available. Did you guys look on Facebook? Do y'all have any questions or anything on your pages? I think we're looking at the same thing, but I'm not quite sure.
I don't have any questions on mine, but I have a question of my own.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
I want to know what it's like to fly right now, David.
Oh yeah, tell us.
You're literally the only person I know who's doing it, so you have to talk.
Yeah.
So for me, since I work for CDC, I have been flying for the last 12 months for responses and stuff. And this trip out to LA was definitely more nerve-wracking than before. It was fairly empty the last couple of months traveling, empty planes, empty airports, people being very hyper-conscious. And at least Atlanta's airport, when I left on Monday, felt a little bit more back to normal than I was personally comfortable with. I noted on Facebook that in the line for bag check, maybe 30% had a mask on. Oh. Two out of the 8 Delta ticket agents didn't have, they had their mask covering their chins, which I guess, or mouth and chin, but not really nose. So it was like that kind of going, people are getting more relaxed.
That's the equivalent of holding your seatbelt in your hand.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to help.
Yeah, on the plane, they as soon as they or everywhere, they're just holding the drink as an excuse. As long as I'm drinking, I don't have to do this stuff. So I think that Delta is a little bit better because they're at least blocking the middle seats. I know some of the other airlines aren't doing that, but LA, I think landing at LAX, it definitely feels a little less back to normal than Atlanta did. So
interesting. Good to know, because I know LAX could be a gym jam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Atlanta is the busiest airport in the world, right? So, I mean, I don't know what's happening with international flights, but I imagine it's only going to get hairier, as that goes on. But that's a good question, and that's good to know. I know a few people that have flown recently, and some photos that I saw were empty terminals and empty baggage, claims. But I mean, I think that's different.
Both, yeah.
Every week, yeah.
Yeah, security was definitely was less busy. I mean, going through all that kind of stuff. The lineup, ticketing was a little long. Going through TSA was not bad. At the gate, it felt full, but honestly, people were for the most part spread out more, so it just filled up more space. But yeah.
No, it's good to know. It's interesting. I can't wait to fly. So
Oh, I'm like literally gonna just grab onto the wheel and like get sucked up.
Go onto the wing. Yeah.
Oh God, I gotta get out of here.
Exactly. So anybody else have any other questions, any thoughts? I'm checking out the Facebook page to see if there's anything here. I don't know if Harry, you're still there, you're listening. You've been maybe in the game longer than all of us, although I know Jonathan a little bit behind you. I would just ask of you and your experience in being a closing attorney in these times. You talked a little bit about 2008, which we talk about on every call, which I think is great. But is there anything else you want to share about this time versus, your experience in past, shifts, if you will? We've been through several, and myself in 19 years, I think this is probably my third shift, and they've all been very different, but you've even been through more. So I was just curious, anything else you have to share to compare or to give us any light at the end of the tunnel kind of advice or anything?
Well, let me say this, that, if you've done this as long as I have, the market is a roller coaster. It goes up and it goes down, and you learn to live with that. You learn to live with the volume. Sometimes it's you're looking for hours in the day because you need more hours, and sometimes you wish you had more to do. And so it's been that way over my history. But never have I experienced anything like this, where there was so much turmoil in the way we're going to do transactions so fast thrown at us. And we've been able to withstand it and accommodate and punt and move when we had to, and really not. And so I think if there are people out there, I can't really discuss with you, people's concerns about their jobs, et cetera. But in terms of historical, rates are terrific. And they're just terrific. And I say this because I've seen this. They'll find a vaccine, they'll find something, and then all of a sudden rates are going to start to go up because the factors are going to affect it, and they'll go up fast. They come down slowly, but they go up very fast. And so if you're on the fence and thinking about doing something, I think now is a wonderful opportunity to do so. I don't see that the lenders have really missed a beat. And I don't think that we've really missed a beat in doing things. And to be very honest with you, I think we become even more accommodating to be able to meet the needs of the people that we serve.
Right.
And I'll add to that. It's like, I've been in the business 25 years, and I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think from the lending perspective, the biggest time of change is when the Dodd-Frank Act came into play after 2008. And the way that lenders were doing business literally was completely changing from start to finish from a compliance standpoint. And we were like, how are we gonna make this happen? I mean, Harry can jump in there as well too, because they had to do things differently from their end. And you know what? We figured it out, and it was not as bad as we had anticipated. And whatever comes our way, we are adaptive. And I think this has shown that, is that, whatever comes next, whatever it may be, whenever it may be, we're going to figure it out. And I think the thing that is really important is to remember how important the housing market is to the overall economy. And that, no matter what's going on, everything is going to be done as much as possible to make sure that the housing market stays intact. Because once that goes, down the tube, everything else is going to follow suit. And I think we saw so much of that in 2008, and we're not seeing that at all in 2020.
And Katie, I say this, you have to live somewhere, right? Everybody's got to live somewhere. And so I've been very fortunate to be able to practice real estate in Atlanta, because I think if you take into consideration the weather, the cost of living, the sports that are here, the airport that is here, the industries that are here that are not tied, such as Texas, to the oil industry, but it's multiple industries that are here, the Fortune 5 companies that are here, the number of people that have moved here, the fact that there's really no mountainous or ocean prohibition to the growth of the city, it's as good a place, I think, as there is probably in the world to live. And I think that Atlanta over the last 30 years has demonstrated that, there's not many places that have exhibited more growth than Atlanta, and I think it's just going to continue. And so I think the stars are really aligned very well for the city in that respect.
Katie, didn't you post something just this past week about the top 10 cities? And I know Atlanta was, what was can you share that a little bit about what you posted?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but it was about the top 8 cities in the United States that are, good places to invest. And by invest, it doesn't mean like, going to buy a house and flip it or whatever. It just means in general, in the housing industry, value-wise. I don't have it in front of me, but it is on my Facebook page, and I can also share it with people. But Atlanta was like number 6. So, I mean, it was a great article, and it was just reiterating exactly what Harry just said. And we've always been high on those lists, but right now I think we shine a little even more because of so many different factors. And again, I hate to use New York as another example, but I personally know several people that have already relocated from New York during this period. And I think they're pretty serious about considering long-term relocation to the south, if not Atlanta, because of affordability and because of space, so I think it's looking even more desirable to a lot of people right now, but it all for a long time. So it was definitely on the national list of the top 8. So yeah, so I agree with everything y'all said. I think it's great, but it's nice to hear it from people, who've been around and aren't scared and, are again, continuing to work and making it happen, like Harry said. So I really appreciate you guys being on the call, all of you. I really appreciate David and Brian joining us from the West Coast, and say hi to the dogs. And everybody on Facebook, I see there's a few people there. If anybody has questions, please let us know. But we are doing these every Wednesday from 5:30 to 6:30, and we'll continue to try to connect live on Facebook. We've been successful the last few weeks, and we do record these so we can with you.
Katie, can I say one more thing, if I may?
And we send, clips throughout the week of the best parts, if you will, which is definitely going to include David and Brian in next week's, I'm sure. No, but seriously, thank you guys. If you have any other questions, let us know.
Yeah, Harry, I think Harry had something to say.
Yeah.
Katie, if somebody was to ask me, what's the one thing that they were interested in real estate to buy or sell, what's the one thing that they should do? The first thing, and I would say, get a real estate agent. All right. There's a lot of moving parts in this process. All right. And I deal with transactions in which there is no realtor involved. And I will tell you that it's a cluster. All right. It's difficult. And there's a lot of potential issues that can arise that can become very personal, and how to maneuver through the entire process. People buy in their lifetimes how many homes? 3, 4, 5, 6 homes. A major investment, and markets change, situations change, and the smart thing to do is to go and hire a real estate agent, somebody that you can trust, that knows the market, that can walk you through the process. Your life is going to be exponentially easier if you do that. And that would be my number one piece of advice to anybody looking to buy or sell. Don't try to do it on your own. It is very complicated, and
I second that emotion.
A lot of things can go into the process that you need assistance.
Robbie and I say amen to that. Seriously, I mean, it's true, because we're here to facilitate the entire thing. I mean, all these people that we work with, we kind of introduce you to them or help get through the process. So without the realtor, it is more difficult. So I really appreciate it. So
absolutely.
Yes, that's why we're here to help. So I know it's almost 6:30, so we're probably going to wrap it up unless anybody else has any other questions. I just want to thank you all for being here, and Hope you have a great evening, and then hope we see you next week on our call. Okay?
Thanks for all the information.
Thanks.
Bye. Have a great
Bye,
night.
everybody.